All right, let's dive into this proposal that really caught my eye. It's all about changing how young people interact with those big institutions, schools, law enforcement, healthcare, even government services.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they want to do it is pretty interesting. They're focusing on emotional intelligence.
Yeah, it's fascinating. The proposal really zeroes in on that disconnect you see so often between young people and these institutions. And it argues that if we can bridge that gap, there's so much potential there for growth and understanding on both sides, really.
Okay, so emotional intelligence, or EI. Now, some of our listeners might be thinking, yeah, I know what EI is. But this proposal, it kind of goes deeper than just the basics. What parts of their approach to EI stood out to you?
What really struck me was how they tailor their approach to different age groups. They recognize that a 12-year-old's emotional development is just completely different from, say, a 19-year-old's.
Right, they've broken down the training into modules for those different age groups.
Exactly. So for the 12 to 14 group, they're focused on building that foundation of emotional literacy. They're learning to identify and express their feelings, recognize emotions in others, navigate those tricky peer relationships. It's all about establishing empathy and self-awareness from the ground up.
Makes sense. At that age, you're really starting to figure out how your emotions play into all those social dynamics. So what about older teens, like 15 to 18? What are the EI priorities for them?
Well, as you get into those later teen years, the focus shifts. It becomes more about skills they'll need as they become more independent and responsible. The proposal emphasizes things like stress management, self-advocacy, and setting goals. I mean, think about it. At that age, they're facing academic pressure, college applications, maybe even their first job. So having the tools to handle stress, communicate their needs, and set realistic goals is huge. It can make a world of difference.
Yeah, it's like each module lines up with the specific challenges that come up at that stage in life. What about those young adults, 18 to 21? What's covered in their module?
That one dives into some pretty advanced EI skills like leadership, resilience, collaborative problem solving, that sort of thing. This is where they're transitioning into roles where they're not just responsible for themselves. They have to work effectively with others, lead teams, bounce back from setbacks.
I love this age-specific approach. It acknowledges that emotional intelligence isn't one size fits all. It grows and changes as we do. But how do they actually plan to teach these skills? I mean, reading a textbook about empathy probably isn't going to get a teenager excited, right?
Oh, absolutely not. And the proposal gets that. They're all about learning by doing, going way beyond lectures and worksheets. They propose things like gamified challenges, simulating real-world scenarios. Like, imagine a game where you practice de-escalating a conflict with a virtual police officer or navigating a tough conversation with a digital teacher.
Oh, that's cool. It makes learning interactive and, dare I say, fun.
Exactly. And that's crucial. They also suggest role-playing exercises where young people can experience different perspectives. So maybe one teen plays a police officer responding to a noise complaint, while another plays the frustrated resident. It's all about building empathy by literally stepping into someone else's shoes.
That's so much more engaging than traditional teaching methods. It's like sneaking in emotional intelligence training disguised as a video game or a drama class. Really clever. But it can't be all games and role-playing, can it?
Of course not. The proposal also highlights the importance of introspection and self-reflection. They suggest things like journaling and mindfulness techniques to help young people really understand their own emotions and how those emotions influence their actions.
For me, journaling has always been a powerful tool. But I can see how some teens might resist that kind of thing.
Sure, there are always challenges when implementing new programs. But what I find exciting about this proposal is how multifaceted it is. They're not relying on one single method. It's like a toolbox full of techniques designed to engage different learning styles and personalities. And by combining that active learning with introspection, they're really hitting all the key aspects of emotional intelligence development.
Okay, so we've got this really well-designed framework for teaching emotional intelligence. But what about its application in the real world? Does the proposal address that?
Absolutely, and this is where I think it starts to get really impactful. They offer concrete examples of how this training can empower young people in different real-world settings.
I'd love to hear some of those examples. I'm picturing some pretty transformative scenarios.
Well, imagine a student who's feeling totally overwhelmed by a class assignment. Instead of just shutting down or, acting out, they can actually approach their teacher calmly, explain what they're struggling with, and ask for the support they need.
Wow, that's a huge shift. Instead of seeing teachers as the enemy, they'd become partners in learning.
Exactly. The proposal also talks about how this training can help young people in their interactions with law enforcement. Imagine a young person who, if they're stopped by a police officer, can stay calm, communicate clearly, and assert their rights while still being respectful of authority.
That could be so powerful. It could de-escalate a situation that might otherwise get out of hand. It's like giving young people the tools they need to navigate those high-pressure encounters.
Precisely. And it goes for healthcare too. Think about a young person who can clearly explain their symptoms to a doctor, ask good questions about their treatment options, and even speak up for themselves if they feel like their concerns aren't being heard.
This proposal really paints a picture of young people who are empowered to take charge of their own well-being in all these different areas of life. But it's not just about giving young people these skills, right? We also have to change how institutions respond to them.
Oh, absolutely. It has to be a two-way street. We can't just train young people in emotional intelligence. We also need to train the adults who interact with them, teachers, police officers, healthcare providers, everyone.
Right, but how do they suggest we actually bridge that gap? It seems like a massive undertaking to change the culture of these huge bureaucratic systems.
It's definitely a big challenge, no doubt about that. But the proposal offers some concrete ideas, like incorporating EI training into professional development for teachers, for example. Imagine a school where teachers are not only experts in their subject matter, but they also have the skills to create inclusive and supportive classrooms, to manage conflict constructively, and to really understand their students' emotional needs.
That's almost a complete paradigm shift in how we think about education.
In a way, it is. The proposal also suggests similar training for law enforcement agencies, things like modules on de-escalation techniques, cultural sensitivity, trauma-informed practices, and communication skills that prioritize understanding and respect.
Those are some heavy topics, for sure. But I think if we're serious about changing the dynamic between young people and law enforcement, these are conversations we absolutely need to be having.
I completely agree. And the same goes for healthcare. Imagine a healthcare system where providers are trained to really listen to their young patients, communicate with empathy and clarity, and create a space where young people feel comfortable asking questions and advocating for their health.
What I'm seeing here is a vision of institutions that are not only more responsive to young people, but also more effective overall. I mean, when there's clear communication, mutual respect, and a shared understanding, things just work better, don't they?
Exactly. The proposal argues that by investing in emotional intelligence on both sides, youth and the institutions they interact with, we create a ripple effect that goes way beyond those individual interactions.
Okay, so let's talk about that ripple effect.
Right.
What kind of broader societal changes could we see if this proposal were actually put into practice?
Well, imagine a future where young people truly feel like they belong in their communities, where they're not seen as problems to be solved, but as valuable assets and partners in progress, where they have a real voice in shaping decisions that affect their lives, and they're empowered to contribute their talents and ideas.
It's a vision of young people not just surviving, but thriving, contributing to their communities, leading with empathy, building a better future for everyone.
Precisely. The proposal suggests that by fostering emotional intelligence, we're not just teaching skills, we're cultivating a mindset that values collaboration over competition, empathy over judgment, understanding over division, and those qualities, when embraced by a whole generation, they have the power to transform not just individual lives, but entire communities.
That's an inspiring vision for sure. But let's be realistic. Implementing a change this big across so many different sectors, it's going to be tough, right? I mean, are there going to be challenges?
Oh, absolutely. The proposal doesn't shy away from the potential roadblocks. It actually spends a lot of time outlining the hurdles and suggesting ways to overcome them.
So what are some of the biggest challenges they foresee? And how do they propose we address them?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is going to be getting everyone on board. We're talking about schools, law enforcement agencies, healthcare systems, government agencies, community organizations. It's a long list.
That's a lot of moving parts. And each of those institutions has its own culture, its own priorities, its own way of doing things. Getting them all to agree to such a fundamental shift, that seems pretty daunting.
Daunting, yeah, definitely. But their idea is to start small, with pilot programs, in a few communities, kind of prove the concept in a smaller, controlled setting first.
Right. So if those pilot programs show some positive results, like increased engagement from young people, better communication between youth and authority figures, maybe even fewer conflicts or disciplinary issues, that could create some momentum to expand the program.
Exactly. Show that it works, get some data, and build a case for wider adoption.
Makes sense. What other challenges are they anticipating?
Well, funding, of course. Something like this, on this scale, it's going to take a significant investment. They suggest a multi-pronged approach, a mix of government grants, private donations, partnerships with businesses, and community organizations.
The smart move.
Yeah.
Diversify the funding so it's not all resting on one source.
Hmm.
But even with funding and everyone on board, I imagine it'd be tricky to develop a curriculum that's both effective and adaptable, right, to all those different communities and contexts.
Oh, absolutely. And the proposal addresses that. They emphasize the need for ongoing collaboration and feedback. They picture a dynamic curriculum that's constantly evolving, based on input from educators, law enforcement, healthcare providers, the youth themselves, and community members.
So not a one-size-fits-all approach, more like a flexible framework that could be tailored to the specific needs of each community. That makes a lot of sense. But even with a great curriculum and dedicated instructors, there's always going to be some pushback, some resistance to change, right?
For sure, yeah. There will always be people who are skeptical, especially when new ideas challenge the old ways of doing things. The proposal acknowledges this and stresses open communication and community engagement, things like town halls, workshops, public forums, to address concerns, answer questions, and really build a shared understanding of the program's goals and benefits.
Transparency is key, it sounds like. Involve the community right from the start. Be upfront about the challenges. That can help build trust, get people invested.
Exactly. And throughout the whole process, from those pilot programs to wider implementation, they really emphasize the need for data collection and evaluation. They want to know what's working, what's not, and how to make the program even better.
Data-driven approach, crucial for any program that aims to make this kind of fundamental change. What specific metrics are they looking at to see if the program is actually effective?
They're measuring a whole range of outcomes, both quantitative and qualitative. On the quantitative side, you've got things like participation rates, changes in disciplinary actions in schools, even crime rates in the communities involved.
Looking for hard evidence that the program is making a real difference.
Exactly. But they're also gathering qualitative data through surveys, interviews, focus groups to see how attitudes and perceptions are changing. Do young people feel more empowered? Do they feel more connected to their communities? Do they trust authority figures more? And they want input from the adults too, teachers, police officers, healthcare providers, to see if their perspectives and their interactions with young people are evolving in positive ways.
So it's a comprehensive approach, recognizing that real change involves more than just numbers. It's about building a culture of empathy, understanding, and respect. But at the end of the day, the success of this whole proposal comes down to one question. Do we, as a society, truly value emotional intelligence?
That's the core issue, isn't it? We can have the best programs, the most innovative curriculum, incredibly passionate instructors. But if we don't believe that emotional intelligence is just as important as academics or athletics, it's not going to take hold. It's not going to thrive.
So this proposal is more than just a blueprint for a program. It's a call to action. It challenges us to rethink our priorities and embrace the power of emotional intelligence.
And I think that's what makes it so compelling. It's not just about solving a problem, it's about building something better. A future where young people are empowered to lead with empathy, where institutions are truly responsive to the people they serve, and where communities are united by understanding and respect.
Wrapping up this deep dive, I have to say, I'm feeling hopeful that we can rise to this challenge. Make the investments, create a world where emotional intelligence isn't just a trendy term, but a way of life.
It would be an incredible world.
It really would. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back soon to explore another fascinating topic.